Here is our spoiler-free video review of Final Fantasy XVI. I've been waiting for this one for a while. Now, many were left wanting more after the beta access of the game, and luckily you are able to play right where we left off. And with this being the first mature-rated Final Fantasy game, we knew that we were in for some pretty dark moments. Now, Final Fantasy XVI is set in the fictional world of Valisthea, which houses 6 nations that hold immeasurable power through access to the magical crystals and dominants. Now, these dominants are essentially humans who act as hosts to each of the nation's icons. Now, these icons may seem familiar if you have played a Final Fantasy game before. They're more commonly known as summons, and we do see a returning cast from Ifrit, Shiva, Bahamut, and many more. These icons form the combat of the game, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Within the world of Valisthea, you play as Clive, a regal son chucked to the mercy of war banners and front lines after the untimely death of his brother. Within the first hour of the game, you are bombarded with so many things that make you struggle to kind of barely keep your head afloat whilst trying to process everything that has happened. The story can sometimes divert you away from the main narrative by adding unnecessary bulk that makes progression sometimes feel like a chore. However, this complicated story is easily digested through a new feature named the Active Time Lore. This feature allows you to pause during any cutscene and gives the player time to understand what has occurred and to make sense of what has happened at any point in the story, which is heavily needed as it does feel that the story has been dragged somewhat. Clive matches the story of the game extremely well, as his character is also complicated within itself. He lacks charisma, and the player has a limited ability to truly feel like they are influencing his story. It does make you wonder why every NPC is happy to be blindly led by him. This is unfortunate, as the backstory to his character does make for a compelling story arc through the sacrifice and pain that he has had to go through during his teenage years, but it does kind of miss the mark. Moving on from Clive, let us now take a look at the combat. Now, this is going to be Marmite. You're either going to love this or hate it. The combat seems to take what was introduced in Final Fantasy XV and ramp it up. Square Enix brought on Ryota Suzuki, who is a Capcom veteran who has most popularly worked on the Devil May Cry series, to man their combat system. The game often presents you with wonderfully crafted cinematic strikes that you're occasionally able to do during boss battles to get an easy stagger bar. The stagger bar works the same as many other popular games: hit the big boss till they become vulnerable, use all your powerful abilities, and rinse and repeat till you get the fanfare music. So with Clive being the dominant of Ifrit, he is able to wield these immeasurable powers. Now, you are able to equip 3 icons at one time, each representing a different element and coming with different abilities. So for example, Titan is a very tanky setup, whereas Phoenix is pretty much all out damage. The cinematography for the game is unsurprisingly excellent and is one of the many things we cannot deny. It oozes beautifully crafted cutscenes throughout the game that will occasionally leave you in awe. Honestly, do we expect anything less from Square Enix these days? The game is full of both charming and intimate moments as well, which provide a much needed break and settles the pacing as it isn't constantly all action, which helps make the game feel more alive and relatable to the player to help understand these characters on a more personal level. There are a lot of cutscenes in this game. Prepare yourself for that. If you are used to a Devil May Cry game where it's just action after action, then you are going to be slightly disappointed. And there is a lot of story told within these games, and that is common throughout the Final Fantasy series, so just beware of that if you're going into it. Another positive is the performance. The game ran very well for the most part. We didn't witness any bugs or crashes, and the game performed at a steady, constant frame rate. And it's worth noting we played an early access build, whereas there is going to be a day 1 patch, so if there was any performance issues that cropped up for other people, it's likely going to be fixed in that patch. Overall, Final Fantasy XVI is a dark, brooding fantasy epic adventure that is full of a rich narrative. However, it is overly sentimental with what could be considered a repetitive and dull combat system that, like I said, you're either going to love or hate. However, we do have to say it is one of the best non-reboot titles that the series has had for quite some time. It is the first approach into the mature category for Final Fantasy, and I hope it's not the last.